Good evening. Hi, I'm Lynne Bader. I'm here from Buffalo Toronto Public Media, and I just first want to thank you so much for joining me. I know it's just the end of the workday, and maybe you just finished dinner and you've sat down to talk, a little bit with us about a really great project that we're working on. I am the executive producer here at WNED PBS, and we have an exciting project put out by PBS, and it's called PBS American Portrait. Well, if some of you have been following some of the work that we've been doing here at Buffalo Toronto Public Media for a while, you know that we've been working on this initiative for a couple of years called Making Buffalo Home. So what we did is we went back and we looked at some of those stories, and we thought these are perfect American portrait moments. These are perfect opportunities to show people and what their American portrait looks like. Well, the American Portrait Project is actually a national storytelling project. You can be a part of it. We hope that you will be a part of it because we want great representation from Western New York. And so tonight, we're going to talk to a few people, watch a few videos, and then we're going to show you exactly how to do your own American portrait. If you go to pbs.org/American-portrait, it'll give you all of the information, but we're going to put that in the chat. And first, I just want to introduce my guests. I have three folks here with me this evening. I have Tom Gattelrab, Sarah Ali, and Juwaria Dahir. Now I know that there she is. Okay, great. So Juwaria has joined us. Tom has joined us. Sarah, hello, you have joined us. You are all familiar with the Making Buffalo Home project, right? I'll have you unmute your mics.
That's right.
Yeah, it was definitely a great pleasure opportunity to do.
Okay, so Tom, what did you do? How did you participate in the Making Buffalo Home project?
Yeah, it was actually that first project we did was kind of just focused on my faith and what that means to me in terms of my culture and the mix of the two. It was really a great opportunity to share that with Buffalo and why that mix of faith and culture really does make Buffalo home. It was honestly a great opportunity.
Excellent. And then Sarah, you were also part of the community filmmaker series that we did as well. And I remember you being very nervous to tell your own story.
I was actually, yeah. I'm not used to just talking about myself a whole lot either, so I try to avoid that topic of me. So it was a little bit uncomfortable, but I loved it in the end. It was great. And I got to talk about.
Yeah. And Juwaria, you were the first person in our personal stories series. And what made you decide to take part in the Making Buffalo Home project? And now that you know a little bit about American Portrait, why does it seem like such a great fit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just generally speaking, when people think about, what the American portrait looks like, everyone has just their unique perspective, their unique, stories. And I thought, well, what a better way to just bring everyone together. And now because of COVID, all the time that we're spending online, glued to our, technologies and our phones, I thought, what a fantastic time to just really revisit this topic and kind of share. So I'm really excited to kind of just see how this story just evolves and how many more connections that we can make.
So what we did is we actually repurposed some of the video from Making Buffalo Home, 10 stories in all, and it's a huge project and it was funded by PBS. We want to thank PBS for supporting this financially so that we could bring this to you. You all can participate in the American Portrait Project. You can upload a video, you can upload a photograph, you can write a short essay and upload it, and it becomes this beautiful mosaic of really what America is all about and how we all have an American portrait that fits in the larger picture. Making Buffalo Home was just a small example of that in a way that looked at immigration here in Buffalo and in Western New York. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a couple of the videos that we repurposed. And so we're going to start with Sarah, your piece. We will air what we turned into an American portrait moment, and then we'll talk to Sarah a little bit about it. And we're going to go through a little exercise, which is exactly what you'll do when you post your own story. As you watch Sarah's story, and as we come back to discuss amongst ourselves, Sarah, and what, why her story took the road that it did, I want you guys to think about your own traditions, your own history, your own hopes and dreams. And I want you to share those in the chat so that we can have a conversation about them. Let's take a look at Sarah Ali's story.
My name is Sarah, and I am a second-generation immigrant. My mom was born and raised in Jordan, and my dad spent many years of his childhood in Palestine. I was born here in Buffalo and then moved to Grand Island. It wasn't until probably third grade when I realized that I was different, and it was directly tied to my ethnicity. I was the only brown girl in my class. It was all white girls around me and white guys, so it just felt different and embarrassing to be in my own skin. You know, being around another language and being around parents who pray and parents who fast was just part of my childhood, so I never thought it was weird until I was told it was weird. I went to Jordan for the first time when I was 13. So I'm supposed to be in a place where I am one of them, but I still wasn't. I was still too American. So, you know, I would come here in Grand Island and I was too brown, and then I'd go to Jordan and I was too American and not brown enough. And it was this constant battle between, you know, who am I and where do I fit into? Moving to the West Side was when I really started to embrace Buffalo as my home. Grand Island really had nothing to offer me in regard to diversity, but living in the city, in a place where people from all over the world were settling to live and people who spoke different languages and looked different is what really made me fall so in love with the city. Today, I still struggle with my identity, mainly not being ethnic enough. I think that's something that I'm constantly going to be struggling with throughout my life, is this battle between, you know, being Arabian enough or not Arabian enough and embracing my roots. But I still feel most at home walking around on the West Side in such a diverse home, and that's what makes Buffalo home to me.
Share your American Portrait moment at pbs.org/American-Portrait. Production support has been provided by a grant from PBS and by viewers like you.
So that's Sarah's American Portrait moment. That's Sarah's American Portrait moment. And it's a short snippet of the longer video that you can find on the Making Buffalo Home site. You know, I've got to say that, Sarah, for someone who was afraid to talk about yourself, you know, you really let us in. And I just want to thank you again for that, because I think it means a lot to people. And I think you probably connected with a lot of people who grow up in a multicultural environment, right?
Right.
Exactly.
And I hope it resonated with some people.
Absolutely. And so the way the American Portrait project works is if you go on the site, you're given a bunch of prompts. And so what I thought we would do is show people how easy it is to do your own story. And I think that's the first thing, Sarah. Would you say to people after doing this that uploading a story to American Portrait is probably a lot easier?
Absolutely, yeah. Just the from your smartphone.
Right, exactly. So we're going to start with one of the prompts from the American Portrait site. And then I would love for all of you to enter your answer to this very prompt. And then Tom and Juaria, let's listen to Sarah's answer, and then maybe we can kind of give our own answer as well. So the first prompt is, I was raised to believe, and I'm going to let you take it from there.
Okay, so I wrote mine. My response is a poem, so don't mind me looking at my phone reading it.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm a page poet. I don't perform poetry, so bear with me. I was raised to believe that the gears moving my bones need to keep on turning, because worth and productivity are the perfect marriage of American exceptionalism. Any deviation is a reflection of my shortcomings. I was raised to believe that my body speaks louder than my words, that tempting men with bare skin is the only path to success, that I have to strive to be different from other women because womanhood is linear, and to be a woman is synonymous with disappointment. I was raised to believe that Middle Eastern features are inherently ugly, that my last name will bring fear when it lands upon white ears, that Islam is not welcome in the land of the free, that my cultural roots should be plucked out of the ground and drowned in a puddle of my ancestors' tears. I learned how to swim in a pool of glass shards. To stay dormant means treading in my own blood. So I kept swimming until I got to the other side, with wounds that healed after I reached a safe haven where I've grown to believe that I probably shouldn't trust what I was raised to believe. That's it.
Wow. I'm going to pause for like applause. Yeah, seriously.
Thanks.
That, okay, so we're going to start with Tom or Juaria. Your initial response to Sarah.
Yeah.
I had not heard it. Sarah did not share this with me before tonight.
No, I was going to say, how do I even follow that? But it's definitely a powerful piece, and it just it really, not just for us as, the American Portrait moments or immigrants or, fill in the blank, but I think as any American to kind of reflect on our upbringing and what we were led to believe as the right way or the true way. And, too much of anything is a bad thing, right? So it's all about that moderation. It's all about learning from, the people here in the mosaic or the American Portrait, but it's powerful.
Wow.
Yeah, just really echoing everything that Tom said. Sarah, I relate with you so heavily because you're absolutely right. You can be too Black in one instance and too the other for something else. And in your mind, you think, comfortably you can navigate these spaces until there's that perspective and perception that people kind of make you feel and make you believe. And then you start to challenge and question your entire identity. So I applaud how you've just navigated this, so profoundly, so well. And I think anybody watching today, hopefully this serves them as a reassurance, that you can fit into multiple forms of identities, etc., and that you don't have to get that perspective from the general public, that it's really your identity and you get to carve that out for yourself.
But it's interesting because identity is one of those things that we are taught from our very first days, right? By the influences of our parents, perhaps the religion or the traditions or the clothing that we wear, the food that we eat. And yet when someone says that you then have to identify as an American, I would love to know from maybe you, Juaria, you were not born here in America, and we're going to get to your story next, but do you feel like an American, and what is that supposed to feel like?
Yeah, very good question. And it's almost like an evolution process that you go through, right? Obviously, me as a Black woman, etc., the first thing that I always think about is really the first time that I had to check a box, and the box that I normally check is Black/African American, and quickly I had to make sure that I understood what that identity meant, and on top of that, what it means to just be American. I think from as an outsider in the beginning, you just focus on the media, whatever that you see kind of publicized in that sense, and the role that America plays. But I think for me, it's when I started to vote, when I became a citizen, I think for me, that's when I really fully my identity as an American. I think prior to that, I didn't feel like I had a voice. So I think the voting process definitely made me the most American. That's what I would say.
So that was sort of a rite of passage, if you will, for you feeling as though you were an American.
Yeah.
I think about other cultures that sort of began Buffalo, that were here, 100, 120 years ago. And, whether it was Polish people, German folks, Italians, right, or the Irish that came, so many came with such a strong tie to their homeland, right? In the same way that maybe some of your families did as well. And I think about the way our country seemed to be a little bit different then, and that there was almost a denial of who you were, and a more of a focus on who you are now in this country. How do you think we've evolved in terms of people's stories? Is that the way it is now? Or are we a little more accepting of people being in touch with their lineage, their heritage, their culture? I'll take anybody in the group.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. This echoes back to Sarah at the end of your video in terms of now, I guess your struggle is in terms of not being ethnic enough. And Lynn, I mean, this might sound horrible, but I don't know that we have necessarily evolved. I think I see it firsthand in terms of my church and the immigrants that are coming in, where at first they have this instinct to just hold on to what they have at that moment and just to completely detract from, let's say, their homeland. And then at some point they realize, wait a second, I should be holding on to that as well as what I have to say to be an American. So it's always constantly a battle or a struggle. And I don't know. I think it's more than a American idea to evolve from, but just a personal thing where each person has that struggle, as Sarah did, where you struggle in terms of that identity and finding the perfect balance.
I'd love to know from some of the folks who are watching right now, what were you raised to believe? And you can answer in the same way that Sarah did. Sometimes we're raised to believe something that later on in life we realize that you grow to believe that you don't have to do what you were raised to believe. And then others feel like what they were raised to believe is something that they will hold with them all of their lives. Whether it's a value or a belief or a faith. I would like to know, Juaria and Tom, what were you raised to believe? Can you think of something off the top of your head that might make a good American portrait entry?
I mean, I guess I was, again, going off that same point, but I was raised to believe in terms of, and I think you see it in the news constantly, but you're raised to believe that American is this list of items that are very eagles and American flags and specific views. But then you turn around and then you have people telling you that American is, the melting pot and multicultural. And again, it's you get these different prompts, but it is that unity between the two. So I guess in terms of what I was raised to believe is that American was one way when really it wasn't either, it was both.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think for me, in a very simple terms, I was just made to believe America is very loud. Loud because of the presence, I guess, really in every platform, in our media, how we hype things up, as how America is portrayed to the world, just really loud. And sometimes loud can, it's got the good and the bad. It depends on what spectrum, which part of it falls on. Loud is necessary when you want to convey a message. And then loud is probably not the best way to communicate when you need to put a message across. So I would just describe it as America being very loud. That's what I was made to believe. And I think it's very true.
Right. So, I was raised to believe that hard work pays off. And, I watched my father go to night school for 13 years while he and my mom were trying to raise 5 children. And, he wasn't like always around, but when he was physically there with me, taught me how to change my oil, how to change my tire, how to, how to buckle down and do the homework, how to be kind to other people. And so when he was there, he was very present in my life. Like those moments were very present for him. And to this day, he's 82 and we have a wonderful relationship. And I can say that I still believe that hard work pays off. It may not pay off in what you see on the outside, but in here, for me, hard work will always pay off. And I'm so thankful to my father for teaching me that. We do have a viewer comment. I'm thinking about the cultures that were here 200, 300, and 400 years ago, whose nations lent the names to the towns and cities in Western New York. There's more than one of many ways to deny. So that's a really good point. Does anybody want to think about that? I think our whole country is re-examining our origin at this moment. Does anybody have thoughts on that?
I think it's a really interesting comment. I mean, here in Buffalo, you'll take different roads in different towns, and people don't even give it a second thought that these originate from elsewhere, and then we're thinking one way or the other. It's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just to complement that, it's not just the last 200 and 300 years, right? Because when you think about the natives of this country, I mean, there's really the Native Americans, right? And outside of that, we're all immigrants. So we all have that shared history and perspectives and experience that we bring in. So even for, I guess, when you think about maybe the first African American population that came, hundreds of years ago, the stories and experiences that they bring before their start as, so I think maybe when we think about starting points, is a starting points to maybe when people first arrived to this country, or really the history and experiences that they also embodied. And I think all of that is important to acknowledge and understand and unpack.
Right.
Just
So we
to
have another
echo
viewer
that.
comment. Oh, go ahead, Sarah. You answer and then I'll share it.
Just to echo Joria, I agree that I think it's important when examining roots in general, ancestral roots and heritage, it doesn't have to just be yours. You can explore other cultures, especially when you're living in such a diverse place like America. It's important to recognize those who were here before Europeans were here and understand those roots and the roles they play today.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very interesting. And one of the things that Making Buffalo Home taught me, I mean, look at me, I'm a middle-aged white lady, right? Living in the suburbs of Buffalo. And one of the things that Making Buffalo Home taught me was how incredibly interesting other cultures are. And it made me a little ashamed. Like, I'm not quite sure what my story is. I know I have a couple of different stories, but in a way, that's been lost. I wasn't taught by my parents or my grandparents, sort of what my story was and what my history was, or my family's history. So another viewer says, I was raised to believe to never give up. Excellent, excellent thing to be raised. You should never, ever, ever give up. You can take a breath, but don't give up, right? We've got another one. I'm not religious and am just an amalgam of European ancestors, so I don't have a very interesting background. See, here we go. Kind of the same thing I just said. But I was put here to leave the world better than how I found it. And she tries to do that. We have another point. Excellent point, Juaria, connecting to Sarah's mention of American exceptionalism. Loud wins, even if it doesn't really. That's so true. And I've heard that my in-laws are actually Canadian, and I often hear that from them, how loud we are. Right. Okay. Lisa says, this conversation is amazing. Sarah, I have never related to someone more. Thank you for sharing your story. Tom, hang on a minute, it's scrolling. You are a light and an incredible representative of your church and culture. Another viewer says, exactly, Sarah, advanced First Nation civilizations that were here hundreds of years before the invasion. I think that now I think we're at a point in American society where you can't ignore it anymore. And why would you want to? Right? So that's where we're at. So we're going to move on. Keep those comments coming. This is absolutely fantastic. We're going to move Sarah, Juaria, to your piece. Okay. So Juaria was the first person in our personal story series on Making Buffalo Home. And I gotta say, you were a light, and your message was so articulately spoken. I don't want to give too much of it away. But again, why was it important for you to be a part of the Making Buffalo Home project? You're such a Buffalo girl.
Thank you. I think I'm a transplant and an ambassador now, but I think there's just, unfortunately, we live in all of this hypersensitive world where if you're not if people don't look different from you in your own bubble, we don't have opportunities to really just relate and share and maybe reach out and just ask questions, and I talk about that in the interviewing segment, why I wear the headscarf that I wear. What does it mean significant wise? To some, they look at that as an element of, oh, you must be oppressed. This definitely cannot be your choice. While on the flip side, it's maybe it's empowering. But who gets to make that conclusion, right? I should be. So if I'm not spotlighted and I'm not sharing my story, I think it's just a disservice. So that was really the driving force for me to be able to share my story, just to shed some light and give others an exposure to be able to connect with someone like me.
Great. So we have Juaria's full story on the Making Buffalo Home website, but we turned her piece into a shorter American portrait moment for this project. Let's take a look.
My name is Juaria Dahir. I'm a Buffalo girl, and I consider myself a Buffalonian. I pray 5 times a day as a Muslim woman. My faith is the first priority for me. It's my religion, but it's also my identity. You know, personally, I've never experienced any unwelcoming feeling. I haven't experienced that here in Buffalo. And it could be because I'm also so personable. I speak multiple languages. It's very easy to talk to me. But I wonder if I was just quiet, what impressions I'm giving people. That does cross my mind. Oh, this person is different. They're probably an immigrant or a refugee, which means they're of a lower status. Which means they're here for a better opportunity, and they should be grateful that they're here. Although we have all the negative things that are going on, of course, racism, you name it, but the good for me is, and when I think of the United States, I see opportunity. The anthem is revolved around freedom. There's also the opportunity to really just be who you are, follow that American dream, and not be questioned or boxed into, you cannot practice this certain religion, and you cannot wear a headscarf in school, or you cannot be of this descent, etc. There isn't those limitations. I am a Muslim woman. Part of the way that I live my life and express myself, my external expressions should tell you that I'm a Muslim woman. But you should ask me how I'm practicing what it means. Like, am I cold? Is that why I'm wearing a hijab? Or is this part of my faith? And I think just opening up those conversations and allowing people to ask without the fear of being labeled as a racist or as a prejudiced immediately. I think that's what we need. We need more of that. People all want the same thing. They want a good education. They want to be healthy. They want to be able to eat, and they want to provide for their family members, their loved ones. If people all want the same thing, it doesn't really matter what you look like or where you live.
Share your American Portrait moment at pbs.org/American-Portrait. Production support has been provided by a grant from PBS and by viewers like you.
I see I have to unmute myself here. I knew that would happen at some point in this hour, but that's Juaria's story or part of Juaria's story, a little moment. And Juaria, thank you so much for sharing that with us. One of the things that you said in your piece that really strikes a chord with me is that we all want the same things. And I think that, like, deep down, I think that's true, right? So the American Portrait Project, again, it's based on prompts. And we're going to show you a video later, in a little bit later, and we're going to show you exactly how to upload your own American portrait. It's super easy. And what's great about PBS giving us all prompts is, you know, it's hard when you sit down with a blank piece of paper and you want to write and you don't even know where to start. Well, PBS helps us out with that. So the prompt for you, Juaria, is, my American story started when, and I'd love to know, I know we heard about it, but maybe you have something different to add. My American story started when.
Yeah, what a great prompt. So I guess one thing I just want to quickly also mention is, I mentioned that I haven't really experienced some specifics, I guess, either whether it's racism or prejudice, etc. And part of that is because of my privilege, and I acknowledge my privilege. I'm an educated woman. I have a good career. I speak very affluently. So I think from that perspective, that itself makes me an anomaly. So I definitely do not want to kind of lump my entire experience to represent everybody. But I think for me, my American journey, I guess it's been evolving, and I definitely referenced, when I first became an American and I was able to vote. But it started when I first was just speculating about the US, what I was seeing in terms of the media, the role that USA was playing, just really unpacking some of those perceptions and not just believing everything that I was reading about or learning about. And this was even before I arrived to the United States. And then the global perspective, especially the role that, America plays in terms of stability, security, trade. And that was kind of really what drove me to kind of unpack the United States. And then the minute that I did arrive, oops, I apologize for that. And
That's okay, go ahead.
Having to just really check one box, which was the Black African American box. In Europe, where I grew up in the UK, obviously I have the British nationality and then the American nationality now. There were multiple boxes that you could check. So there wasn't just that one specific one. So I think it's so important for me to understand, the role that African Americans have played in this country, how they have paved the way for me to be here. That was very important for me, and understanding maybe my role in this country. So a lot to unpack in terms of my identity. I can relate with Sarah and everything that Tom is referred to. So this is a really good conversation, and I'm so excited to see that stories like this are being spotlighted at this time.
Absolutely. So your American story in your mind began before you actually came to America, right? I have a couple viewer comments that I want to read, and then I want to ask Tom, you and Sarah the very same prompt. My American story started when, and maybe it was, the day you were born. I don't know. So we're going to go with, Skinder says, thanks, Tom, Juaria, and Sarah. As an immigrant, I believe many have developed a third culture in which we have taken the good from both our native country and also from our adopted country. So the idea is take the good and leave the bad, right? I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Bill says Buffalo is a beautiful mosaic, not so much a melting pot. And I love that analogy. I think that's great. That deserves to be celebrated by all. Out of many, one, e pluribus unum, right? And then Bill also says, thank you all for speaking out, speaking up to share who you are. Each of you are important threads in Buffalo's fabric. Many years ago, I did a documentary called Remembering Toronto. And I interviewed Mel Lastman, who was a former mayor of Toronto. And when I asked him, because at that point, I didn't see the multiculturalism here in Buffalo 20 years ago. There wasn't nearly as much. And, certainly it wasn't being spotlit in any sense. And so I said to him, Canada is really, and Toronto's kind of like a melting pot. There's like a couple hundred languages spoken here. How can you run a city, right, when there's so much multiculturalism? And he says to me, it's not a melting pot. It's more like a salad bar, right? He says it's fresh and it's fun and it's new and it's healthy. And I don't think of it as a melting pot. I think of it like a big salad, right? So Anza Buell, I'm probably going to butcher your name, and my apologies for that. That was superb. I just wish there were and are so many more avenues for those from non-Muslim or non-religious backgrounds could have more opportunities to exchange ideas. So we can talk about that in a minute. Tom and Sarah, when did your American story begin?
Well, I guess I'm trying to think of how I would identify the American story and what the typical American experience is like, and I don't think there is a answer for that. So,
okay.
And to be honest, yes, I am an American, not by choice. I just am. But I don't exactly encompass what American typically means. And I think it's important to take what makes America America, and kind of going off of what one of the commenters said, you leave the bad. I don't think you can leave the bad. I think you should understand the bad.
Yes.
And that's how you grow from that point on and move forward. So.
Right. That's an interesting point that you bring up, that we can't ignore the bad. We can't leave it and take it out like the garbage, right? We need to examine it and understand it to help us move forward in a positive way. How about you, Tom?
I also got to unmute here. No,
Okay.
off of Sarah's point, I think that's a really good, thought in that it is kind of hard to identify the American story. And I guess it's different for each person. And, I was sitting here watching Joaria's video and I'm trying to think like, gosh, when did my American story begin? Like, sure, I could say it was when I was born, but it never really felt like that. Oddly enough, I think it was shortly after my father had passed away. It was kind of, I was coasting at that point. I was just being Tom. But at that moment, I was like, hold on, let's reel this back. Let me dive into who was my father, what was the culture, what was the faith, like kind of learn more about who he was. And in turn, I learned more about who I was as an American, as an Egyptian, as just that quote unquote American story of the mix of the two. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So I'll just share a very short story and then we'll move on to Tom's video. My American story started when in the late 1960s, my mother got pregnant out of wedlock in 1967 and decided that she was going to go through with this pregnancy, but knew that she was not in a position to parent me. And so she ended up hiding her pregnancy through most of the school year. She was a very young school teacher at the time. She wore big dresses. And as soon as the school year ended, she moved from a town in southern Missouri up to St. Louis, Missouri, and stayed at a home for unwed mothers, where she went through, a lot of ridicule and knowing that she was about to do the hardest thing she was ever going to do in her whole life. So she gave me up for adoption. And come in Mel and Rita Bader, who'd been trying for years to have a child. And I was their first child. I made them parents. And so my American story started when a woman made a very courageous decision to give me parents that she felt like I deserved at the largest expense to her own well-being. And it's interesting because my American story then went on. And at the age of 21, I was able to find her and meet her. And I ended up knowing her longer than I didn't know her and was with her when she passed away a couple of years ago. And I feel like I have two families, right? And they both bring things to who I am and my identity. And they're both very different kinds of families. But I feel like for me, I didn't feel like my story was complete until I had closed that circle. Right. But it taught me a lot about sacrifice and selflessness and gratitude to my parents who desperately wanted to have a family. And I was the beginning of that. Right. It's a pretty special thing to have. So we're going to move on. And so I think if I did an American Portrait story, I might tell that story, because to me, it's really so much of my identity and who I am. So Tom, we're going to move on to your story. You were a community filmmaker in Making Buffalo Home. And I'm going to share a little secret that's not so much, it's a secret in the world, but so Tom and his friend at the time, Lisa, were both community filmmakers. I think actually, Tom, you suggested to Lisa that she sign up. Tom and Lisa were friends at the time. And who's getting married later this year? Tom and Lisa. So Making Buffalo Home did a little matchmaking. I think we had a little something to do with that. I'm going to take credit for it anyway.
No, I was going to say for sure. It was, we had met at Rich's, and it was funny enough that I think Making Buffalo Home had something to do with Rich's at the time. And it's just been kind of the through line. So yeah, initially I had told her for her to do it and not me, because, she's a journalist. I thought it would be more fitting for her. And the rest is history.
Well, we talked you into it too. So here is Tom's American Portrait moment.
I'm Tom Gattelrab, and my family moved to Buffalo in 2005, originally from Egypt. I was born here in upstate New York, down in a city called Suffern. I think it's a very important thing to share the Egyptian culture. A lot of people may not necessarily understand exactly, where I'm from, what I represent. especially of how ingrained faith and culture are together for the Egyptian community. What comes to mind right away is love, family, and just empathy in it. I guess empathy may be a broad term, but truly it stands the test of time in terms of a very crucial thing for us. Food, I guess, is a huge thing for us Egyptians, but on Saturday it starts with the preparation of oblations, which is, in Arabic we call it the orban, the bread and body of, that we use during Sunday's liturgy. So that is prepared Saturday night. This is a type of leavened bread, and again, that's using yeast, water, and flour to make this bread that is a representation of the body of Christ that we use on Sunday's liturgies. We actually fast from roughly around Thanksgiving all the way to January 7th, a month in our calendar called Kiah, where we're fasting from a lot of the delicious things that are generally around during the holidays. Can't have any milk, can't have any yogurt, can't have any cheese, can't have any steak, nothing, no chicken. Now you're probably thinking, Tom, that's ridiculously hard. It is, but again, we're trying to gain that benefit from the spirituality. But there is another benefit. We have this huge gathering after January 7th liturgy where we come together with delicious plate. So January 6th, once the nativity liturgy is done, not a second later, we're down in the kitchen and we're devouring bechamel, kufta, kibda, and kak cookies. See, it's the jubilation, the celebration of Christ's birth and the nativity. We've journeyed through this fast, growing spiritually, and we're enjoying it at the end, both spiritually and with the food.
Share your American Portrait moment at pbs.org/American-Portrait. Production support has been provided by a grant from PBS and by viewers like you.
Tom, thank you so much for sharing your story. You know, Lisa's a lucky girl and you're a lucky guy. But you know, I think about how much your faith plays a role in who you are, and in this country where we have freedom of religion, freedom of any religion we want, to be able to practice without fear any religion that we want. It is a really important part of your life, isn't it?
It's crucial. I mean, it's in a sense of, you know, I carry myself obviously as an American, as an Egyptian, but you know, everything I do is ingrained in my faith, as it is with many people, and also not many people. But in terms of everything I do, I carry that empathy, or I carry that love, and I try as much as I can where, as you're saying, you know, when someone meets me, they don't meet me as Tom, but they meet me as that Coptic, Egyptian, Christian, you know, American. You know, they get that list. They don't just get my name and my occupation or what that conversation was about.
Mm-hmm. So the prompt that I've chosen to give to you is probably an easy one. I can almost guess the answer, but we'll see. So what I want to give you is, the tradition I carry on is.
So I guess I'll answer in a swerved way, but you know, for a while, you know, in terms of those videos that I've made, in terms of the tradition I carry on, of course, the easy answer would be in terms of my faith and, you know, the preparations and the fasting and the spiritual growth. But, you know, as I continue now, and as you actually eloquently brought up, as I prepare to marry Lisa, a lot of it is self-growth in terms of what tradition do I carry on. You know, for the longest time, I thought I am an Egyptian, American, Coptic Christian. But as I learn to become one with Lisa, it's more in the sense of what are we? And it's a matter of, okay, you know, Lisa, so she's Lebanese, and one might think, okay, those are similar cultures in terms of the Middle East, but there's a lot more at play, you know, and I think it's a balance for both of us, as this American Portrait project is, where it's, okay, what is the values that we can bring from the Egyptian side as well as the Lebanese side? And sure, there are Coptic traditions and there's Catholic traditions, but how do we continue as Christians? How do we continue as Americans, as Egyptians, as Lebanese, all in one?
All in one. That's That's a little challenging. I mean, I think that many families go through that and are very challenged by that. So the prompt was, I think, really appropriate for you. We have a viewer comment, Mustafa, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're still with us. Took me a few minutes to get to your comment, but it is natural for there to be a difference in the world. And this difference does not necessarily mean that you are right and others are wrong. Or, on the contrary, it is only different views and differing beliefs that have been formed throughout history and based on multiple factors. Always strive to respect others' cultures and accept them as they are without mockery. You know, I think that that's a really interesting message to send. And so I'd love to hear from others who are watching right now. You know, maybe you're in a situation like Tom is, where your family has two very different backgrounds or traditions that maybe you've struggled with. You know, which ones do you keep? Which ones do you honor? What do you teach your children about those traditions? Because it can be very challenging, I'm imagining. So we have another one. Superb, Tom, of course. Definitely elucidate, yes, about your perspectives on your identity as an Egyptian US citizen Christian in tandem with Egyptian Muslim identity. Most US folks do not understand that, right? And so I think that what traditions you carry on, Sarah, are there traditions that your family carries on that you think you will continue to carry on?
It's kind of funny you asked that, because as I was raised to be Muslim, and my parents are traditional, there aren't many traditions that I clung on to, which I sort of regret. Some of the more cultural stuff is just big family dinners, and a lot of lamb. But other than that, unfortunately, I don't have a better answer. No, I think if I had more ties with my Jordanian family members, probably we would have had some traditions to bring back here. But
well, and I got to enjoy one of your family dinners when we first met, and it was delicious. So if you carry on any tradition, I think you carry on your mother's cooking, because it was phenomenal. Juaria, what about you?
So Sarah, I'm waiting for my invite so I can try that too. I guess for me, I mean, I have, you know, my husband and I, we have two young boys, they're 8 and 7, and I'm always thinking about what is it that I want to carry on. There's some things obviously that I've picked on. I've lived in so many different countries, so it's just so tough sometimes to just think about one or a couple of things that specifically connect to my parents. I'm picking up some traditional values that I got from Switzerland, lived there in rural parts for 10 years. I lived another 10 years in the UK. And now, of course, my kids being born here, making sure that they embody and understand how all of those identities and cultures can hopefully strengthen them. And one of the viewers earlier, when they just mentioned the melting pot versus, you know, was it the salad bowl?
The salad bowl was Toronto, but they said a mosaic, which I like. I like that analogy. Go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah, because, and I think that individual is so right, because, you know, if you think about a melting pot, you're assuming that maybe everyone has to assimilate, and that we're looking for like one sense of population. Whereas, you know, when you think about the mosaic stance, I think it's a good metaphor, but it's a way for building this multicultural society that can integrate, you know, different cultures, but maintain those separate identities and contrast some of those melting points. So I thought that was just, you know, so beautifully said. I think food is going to be one big thing. I'm not the best cook, so I hope I carry that on. But language is probably another big one to me. Speak 5 languages. My kids only speak 1, unfortunately. So really, they can understand the other ones, but not really speak and respond. Okay. So that's something I have to work on.
But you speak 5 languages.
I do, yes.
What are they, if you don't mind me asking?
All right. So I speak, of course, English, German, which is Hochdeutsch.
Okay.
I speak Arabic, then I speak Swedish. Mali.
Wow. I am so, like, I'm in awe because I speak English and that's it. And I remember in high school, I got out of the foreign language requirement because I was in choir and we sang some of our songs in other languages. And I regret that now so much. So we have someone else, the tradition that she carries on from Heather. We celebrate Canada Day more than July 4th, and use Canadian Thanksgiving to celebrate with friends. We're a little too far to see our Canadian family, so that's our compromise, right? And my in-laws are Canadian too. My spouse is Canadian, and we celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving, and we celebrate American Thanksgiving. What I want to do before we get out of time, because it's like 10 minutes to 7 already, is I want to show people how easy it is to upload a story to the American Portrait site, because the goal of this evening, and I thank you all for sharing your stories, is to help each other see that you're an important part of this American Portrait project, and you do have something to say. You have a story to tell. And so all you need to do is think about what that is, take a look at the prompts on the website, and then upload your story. I would love to see hundreds of stories that are posted to this site that come from Western New York. So we have a short video from our friends at KEET, that's another public television station, and they put together this really cool tutorial video that walks you through the steps. So let's take a couple of minutes and watch that.
Hey, this is David Thompson with Keat TV, and today I'm going to show you how to upload your story to PBS American Portrait. First thing we're going to do is go to pbs.org/American Portrait. The first time you log on to this site, it's going to ask you what your local PBS station is. If indeed it is Keat, please just say yes. So then just scroll down, and in the little menu over here, you're going to select account, and if you already have an account, you just log in. But if you haven't, it's real simple. You put in your email address, your first name, your last name, zip code, date of birth, and then click the I agree to terms of use and privacy policy, and then hit register. Now you'll see it tells me this email is already being used, and that's because I've already registered. So instead of registering, I'm just going to hit login. After you type in your email address, you're going to click send the magic link. And this is just a confirmation that you're a real person. It's not actually magic. And you can see this is the email I received. So just click login. From here, click share a story. Hit get started. So I'll click see all prompts, and we can scroll down. So here's the prompt that I picked. Here you have 3 options. You can upload a video up to 1 minute long, up to 5 images, or up to 800 characters of text. So for this example, we're going to do a video. I'll hit next. Here you can upload your file. So I can just click and drag it right on, and then hit next. This will take a couple minutes to upload. After about a couple minutes, your video should be done uploading. Go ahead and pick the thumbnail that you want and hit next. Here you can caption your video. Just as a little teaser, I'm writing, I took a risk when I quit my job, because that's what my story's about. You can post it anonymously if you want. And I'll hit next. Select which theme best describes your story. In my case, it's work. I'll hit next. And then here's a preview of what it will look like. And that's all there is to it. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you share your own story on PBS American Portrait.
So that was incredibly simple. Very, very easy process. Don't you guys agree? Like easy, easy peasy. Just a few minutes before we came on to do this event, I signed up, right? And because I wanted to find out, is it as easy as everybody says it is? And it's super simple. We have a few minutes left. We've got a couple of more viewer comments. I'm so glad they're coming in. Eskinder says, the tradition that I cherish dearly is the importance of family cohesiveness and respect for elders. Not because of how much money one has, but the positive role that the elders play in the community. And then Iman Gaddalrab, so proud of you, Tom. Your mom had to say that she's proud of you, which I think is great. I think that's awesome. I know. So thanks, Tom's mom, for watching. We really do appreciate that as well. I think the tradition that I carry on, coming from a large family of 5, the oldest of 5, and just having, I have 16-year-old twins now, but pretty much every single night until they have jobs and are no longer around, we have dinner together as a family. And a lot of people don't have an opportunity to do that and have that time to share with each other. And I think that it is something that it's not as formal as it was when I was growing up, but I cherish that time together, because sometimes you just look around the table and you think, you know, these people right here are my greatest blessings, and they're not going to be here forever. You know, kids are going to go off to college. Juaria, I'm telling you, don't blink, because like, bam, they're gone. So anyway, that's a tradition I carry on. You know, I just, again, any parting words from the 3 of you to all the folks watching? Let's give them a little encouragement to sign up and share their own story. We'll start with anyone who wants to begin.
I'll just chime right in.
Go ahead.
I think everyone, at least the people that I've been sharing this with, I know you all have an incredible story to share, and I know you all are creative, so you have a creative way of sharing that story, and it's something that should be heard. So it takes 2 seconds to make the account. I did it. It's just a few seconds, and it's totally worth it. If it's a song, if it's a poem, absolutely do it.
Great. Tom or Juaria?
Yeah, I can go next. I mean, Sarah just covered it so well. You're absolutely right. A lot of us just kind of think that our stories are just unique. And you never know, there's somebody else in the world, somebody else here in Western New York that's going to relate, that's going to be empowered by your message. So, you know, it's going to be a click of a button. I did it, Sarah did it, Tom did it. It's your turn. You saw the tutorial. I can't wait to see all the new images and uploads that I get to watch too.
Yeah, and to go right after that, I was going to say, you know, echoing Sarah, you know, sharing it with all the people in my community. You know, you might think, oh, Tom already did it, but no, you know, there's what's the saying? No man steps in a lake twice. You know, because you change every day and the environment changes every day. So it was definitely a lot easier, I think, to do the American Portrait than it was to do the community filmmakers. So I'm excited to see these stories come up.
Yeah. So we do have one final question, and I'm going to pose it to all 3 of you. Mustafa says, my question to the panel is, how can you interact with cultures that are different from yours? So maybe you don't know anything about that culture. How do you acquire the skills necessary to respect and accept them?
Treat them the way you want to be treated. Be empathetic, be understanding, be human, and never make assumptions. I think that's really what it is. I mean, just by looking at me, I've had a couple of experiences myself where people think I might not speak the language, or maybe I'm a newly arrived refugee who is looking to, I don't know, get some specific service, etc. All these assumptions about my identity based on what I look like. I think that's really the biggest challenge. A lot of us are so ignorant that sometimes just scared to ask, to reach out. But I think at the end of the day, treat everyone the same way that you want to be treated. And I think if you can have that basic understanding, there's no textbook that's ever going to convey that. You just have to be able to do that.
Great advice.
I think that's very poignant. And I'd say, don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. I mean, being uncomfortable means you're learning something new or you're trying something new. I feel a lot of us are, you know, you try to stay in your little bubble, but explore it. Just jump in, you know, whether it's heading to a new neighborhood or trying a new food or just asking a new question. Yeah.
Sarah?
To echo what Tom and Juaria said, don't be afraid to do some self-reflection and self-examination. You know, why do you have certain biases? And instead of ignoring them, acknowledge them and grow from them, and be able to understand that when you're meeting somebody from a new culture or a new country or whatever, that you're going to have your biases and you might not understand it. And like Tom said, you're going to get uncomfortable. That's a great thing. Be uncomfortable. Get out of your comfort zone.
Right. Growth happens when we get out of our comfort zone. And so Don't stay comfortable on your couch. Get out of your comfort zone and upload an American Portrait. Let other people know about you. Let other people know your story. Share your story with us. We want to hear them. I want to hear them. They are all a part of the fabric of who we are. And, this is what we do in public media. We share stories and we want to know our neighbors. We are a community. We serve our community and we want to serve the entire community. And that's why we really want you to be a part of this project. Again, I have to thank PBS for providing the resources and viewers like you to do these American Portrait moments, to do things like making Buffalo home. It seems kind of cliche, and I know that this is the way we do business, that you watching WNED PBS or going online or taking part in public media in an active way by being a contributor is the way that we can do more projects and programs just like this. And that's what we want to do. So again, I want to thank our guests, Juaria, Tom, and Sarah. Making Buffalo home has enriched my life because now I'm friends with the three of you. And that just means everything. And I thank you so much for watching and sharing your thoughts and your stories with us. Now go to pbs.org/American-Portrait and upload your story, and have a great evening.